Former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky joins me now. And Andrew, look, the administration has filed a motion saying that the judge's order not enforceable. It's messy, for sure. Can you break it down for us?
Well, I think we first have to start with the idea that the president has the authority to protect our borders and to make sure that we're not becoming subject to incursions or foreign enemies coming in here. And that's exactly why he used the Foreign Enemies Act to essentially take out Trende Aragua in the most efficient way possible. Now he's battling with the courts on whether he's allowed to do that, and if so, exactly how to go about doing it. I think he is very much in the correct to be doing this. If the law that's 200 years old was meant to allow the president to expel those who are incurring on our land, what else would it look like than what we're seeing, taking over apartment buildings and committing terrible crimes?
But the critics say, look, that law, going all the way back to the 1700s, is to do with declaring war, and only Congress can declare war. We're not officially at war. Therefore, what the administration is doing is not legal.
Well, it says war or incursions. And so there is room in there to apply to these types of enemy organizations, people who are connected to the state but aren't necessarily a troop uniform-wearing enemy combatant type threat. And when you have those people, those are the folks that really are a dramatic risk to the homeland. People who come here, who aren't in uniform, who aren't declaring a formal type of war, but serve a very real risk to our nation. The president has to be able to do something about that. And the court's taking over the president's job and trying to rearrange how that's happening. For how long does the judge want Trende Aragua here? For how long should we be dealing with this and putting this through a due process system? So there are real issues that the president has the authority to act on, and the courts seem to be not just frustrating, but not giving a solution to. That's right.
Another one for you. Are the administration losing their bid to reverse the order to reinstate those fired federal employees? What happens in this issue? What's next?
Well, the Trump administration now is lost essentially 2 rounds on that battle. I think this is one that's going to go to the Supreme Court. The question here is, how does a president go about getting rid of positions that are no longer necessary in the executive? That's an executive function. It should be the president, who's essentially the CEO of our country, deciding whether or not there are positions that are needed to get the job done. And when he decides those jobs are not necessary, is it really the court's job to be telling us to keep those people employed for how long and to do what in the meantime? Again, we have courts telling the president how to be the president, not evaluating individual case-by-case situations, but these broad stroke approaches. That's very problematic. And I think the Supreme Court needs to weigh in on that very heavily.
And do you think that will happen?
I do. All of these cases are headed to the Supreme Court. I think the wise thing for the Supreme Court to do would be to give as broad of a ruling as possible
to cover
these questions about the executive authority instead of returning to court on each and every case.
This is an interesting one. Listen to what the White House has to say about Joe Biden potentially not signing his own name on his pardons. Listen.
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired, but the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Whoa. So the question is, if Joe Biden himself did not sign those pardons using an auto pen, I guess, are they null and void, Andrew?
Well, the way to test those pardons will be to prosecute those people who were allegedly pardoned. Just like when President Trump said, I have presidential immunity, the Democrats and the Biden DOJ threw that out the window. They prosecuted anyways. Turns out President Trump was right, but it didn't stop the prosecution from going forth for years and years. That's exactly what the Trump administration will need to do. If they have suspicion of a crime, whether somebody claims to have been pardoned or not, they need to investigate that. If they've got enough to prosecute, you prosecute it. If they want to make their claim that they've been pardoned, go ahead and do that. We'll figure that out. I think the auto pen is an issue, but more than the auto pen being an issue is whether President Biden actually knew what he was pardoning them from. These broad
and that's hard
pardons.
to prove, is it
It's very
not?
hard to prove. Who knows how long he'll be alive to be able to answer to that. But the pardons need to speak on their face and need to reflect that the president at the time knew exactly what he was doing. And there's real serious questions on that. I think these pardons are very troublesome.
They could be reversed.
Not just reversed, just essentially not recognized as not being sufficient.
It's hard to keep up with it all, isn't it? There's so many issues, but good for Andrew here who can shed some light for us on so many issues. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.